From the moment we are born, we're put into a space, assigned gender and expectations, and that's without even mentioning race. As we grow, as we learn, this is reinforced every day. From home ec versus metalwork to the sports we're meant to play. And for certain groups from very young, barriers further mount. From caring responsibilities to education barriers, challenges mount and mount. We've come a long, long way. Everywhere, women are breaking through. But we have to fight. We swim upstream, all the things we have to do. Many had to protest. We have to shout. We must all call bad behaviour out. We need greater representation, more women at the table. We are the voices of change, equality, and we are well able. Better support and policies, better balance from the start. We need progressive options to mean equality from the heart. We need to each take responsibility, and we need champions too. Fighting for equal pay and greater flexibility. An equal life means equal work, better balance, you see. Shoulder to shoulder, on equal rungs. Equal opportunity will come. I'm Sonia Lennon, founder of Dress for Success Dublin and your host for today's IWD 2021 Choose to Challenge webinar. Huge thanks to our sponsors today, One for All, Communicorp Media Group, TAP Creations, Irish Life, and of course our hosts here, Business and Finance Media Group. And now to our CEO, Angela Smith.
Hello, my name is Angela Smith and I'm the CEO of Dress for Success Dublin. I would like to thank the committee, panellists, sponsors and all the companies who got behind the campaign this year. We in Dress promote the economic independence of women by providing job search supports and career development services. This year, this International Women's Day, we are asking you to donate your commute. Women have been disproportionately impacted by COVID, and we want to reach and support over 500 women this year on their journey to work. So every penny you raise will help us achieve that and make a difference. I also want to say enjoy the webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm absolutely delighted to be coming to you from the Water's Edge studios today. It's International Women's Day. The theme is Choose to Challenge, and I am joined today by some amazing women who are going to talk about challenges from very different sectors and perspectives. Jenny Egan is Team Ireland Marathon and Sprint International Canoeist and gold medal hopeful at the Olympics. Aoife Davey is Senior Marketing Director for One for All. Tracey, Carney, our host, is Managing Director of Business and Finance Media Group. And Allison Keating, Chartered Psychologist, owner of bWell Clinic, author and columnist. Amazing women who are going to be very generous in sharing their stories. The theme this year for IWD, Choose to Challenge, is kind of a fascinating one because one of the biggest things that we face as women in the workplace is understanding the challenges we face. And I think now, particularly in times of COVID, we have seen challenges rise to the surface that we didn't even know existed. And today we're joined by amazing women who have very, very different perspectives from very, very different sectors to discuss the challenges that we face personally, organisationally, and systemically, three very different areas. Jenny, I'm going to come to you first. You are effectively a woman in a man's world, and you must have faced challenges along the way.
Yeah, so I've been a canoeist since I was 8 years old. I've been competing internationally. So in Ireland, there's not many female canoeists. So I've always trained with men and boys. And it's all I've ever known. But for me, I adapted to that situation. But for some women, they wouldn't be comfortable in that area. So thankfully, there's a lot of progress being made in getting more females into sport, not just athletes though. So for example, I'm on the Sport Ireland Women in Sport Steering Committee, and this committee has been put in place to steer the Women in Sport policy. And this policy shows that there's a place for everyone in sport. So there's 4 target areas. That's leadership and governance, coaching and officiating, active participation and visibility. So we're trying to help women to get into all different areas of sport and help them to have the confidence to use their skills and be able to feel that they can help all different aspects of sport. So for example, we could have female CEOs, we could have board members of NGBs, we could have more female coaches, we could have more female referees. So it's to show that there's a place for women in all aspects of sport and for them to be confident to feel that they can go into that area. And this funding is helping to train women to be more confident and have the skills also to go into the 4 different target areas. So it's a really big step forward by Sport Ireland, and it's great for the future of women in sport.
And Jenny, you are the only woman on that grouping, am I right?
So I'm not the only one on the Sport Ireland grouping. That's a combination of female and males, which is great because it's about not only women sporting women, it's about men sporting women, it's about society working together as a whole. But the training group I train with at the moment, I'm the only female involved. And that's what is very different to some other aspects of life. So for me, I'm the only female training with men and boys. And I've had to adapt to that situation and be able to use my strengths to work with men. And for me, like I said, it's kind of all I've ever known, so it's fine. But for some women to get into that area, it's very difficult, and they need to be able to understand how to maybe work with men, and men need to be able to understand how to work with women.
So Aoife, you are in a very different sphere, and I suppose sport is really making huge efforts to bring that equality to the fore. In the corporate world, ostensibly, we're much more used to the idea of women being part of the format of how we do business. But you must have faced personal challenges along the way as well.
Absolutely, definitely. And I think probably one of the biggest challenges I think I faced, and the most recent, was when returning from maternity leave. I think I came to motherhood later. I was 39, so I had a long time to establish myself in my career, but also get used to being able to give my career my all. And nothing prepared me for what it was like when I came back. And it's just that suddenly find yourself juggling these 2 very different worlds and feeling that you're neither of them you're doing that well. And for me, that was a bit of a shock. And it also gave me insight into, say, other women that I've managed, that how we didn't probably have, strong enough support networks for them. Now, I was able to reach out to coach to my support network, but not every, particularly if you've maybe come to motherhood earlier and you haven't developed a network, that it can be very hard. So I think just what businesses need to do is to think about that. And it's just a support network as simple as the woman being able to be vulnerable, to be able to, hear from, not to think that she's the only one experiencing this, and even a bit of support even before you go back, to be able to, that's a confidence piece, but it's also just knowing that you don't have to be, this power horse, which often, you associate maybe with women in business that are very successful, that, they just get on with it. They're amazing. They can do everything. But that's very hard. And that it's such a pivotal time in a woman's career, because often we know that women then make a decision not to to pull back or to change career, to feel that they can't work like they used to. So I think if businesses are serious about nurturing female talent, that needs to be something that's looked at. Because for me, if I didn't have a support network, it could have definitely led to some changes that wouldn't, you can make rash decisions at that time because you're so emotional.
Absolutely. And I think that vulnerability piece is so important, because we are kind of whole humans at work now. It's not like we can completely separate what happens at home and what happens in the workplace. And, I'm very passionate about the idea that male leaders can become comfortable with their own vulnerabilities, even about how to engage with women at work. And the more we surface these challenges and talk about them, the more we can create solutions for them, you know. And Tracey, what about you in terms of a woman in, you know, engineering and in media? What were the challenges that you faced along the way?
And when I had a think about this, you know, I think my earliest challenge was really when I was challenged by my physics teacher in fourth year in school. You know, she challenged me to attend a Women in Engineering Day. She noticed I was good at maths and physics, and prior to that, I'd been looking at kind of roles in arts and kind of and I completed my work experience in RTE. So I went on this Women in Engineering Day and I got to solder. I built a radio. And it was from then that I decided to study electronic engineering. Now, I'd never seen a woman engineer, didn't know what one would look like. And, you know, in one day, my entire perception of kind of the opportunities available to me totally changed. And I suppose it's really highlighted to me, you know, the ability we have to influence, I suppose, young women and not to limit them in certain subjects and what they're doing. I was lucky enough, I was in a mixed school. So we had metalwork, woodwork, tech drawing, and I experienced them all up to junior cert, but I don't think it should be down to luck, you know, and I think we need to be able to ensure that young women and everyone out there has the opportunity to see what they can be, because, you know, if you can't see it, and it is down to this, and I know this comes up in the sport piece as well, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So I think that's really important, but it was definitely a challenge to my perception about my role and what I could be in the future, you know.
And I think both parents and teachers are such an influential force with young kids in terms of, you know, what's available to you. I'm mortified to talk about the fact that when my twins were about 4, I bought them these beautiful kind of Danish design duvet covers, one with a ballerina, one with an astronaut. Like, that's so embarrassing to me now that I would have pigeonholed those children into those roles, you know. But I think once you know it, once you build this awareness of that sort of gender stereotyping, you know, you can't go back, you can't unknow it. So Allison, you know, you're at the coalface with women who are facing these challenges in organisations every day. What are you seeing coming to the fore as the big issues?
Exhaustion. And just listening to you all there, I mean, I can just identify and resonate with it so much myself, you know, as a mother, as a business owner, as a psychologist. And I'm very lucky. I get my eyes and ears inside the door at an individual level where I see these incredible professional, competent women who, like you're saying with the vulnerability piece, are scared to, in any shape, let it be seen that they're a normal human being, that their kid was up all night long, or that, you know, so many factors are involved. So I love this idea of how we challenge. And from my perspective, it's how do we challenge with compassion for ourselves, first of all. And I think one of the key things we have to target is kind of a combination of the unconscious bias that we all have, even with ourselves, and just to kind of tune in. And as I say, we've got to make the invisible visible, which is not that easy a process. But like you said, with the duvets, all of a sudden it's like, oh, and then you can't unsee it. But I mean, it's to even give yourself a break, and it's so great to be able to say, oh, I did that, but now I recognize it and I'm going to change. And that, I think, is the strength piece.
That's it. That's the pivotal moment, I think.
I would love to see that in organizations. And I was really lucky to watch Melinda Gates talk to David Letterman the other night. And she was talking about, you know, the work she'd done in the developing countries, about women. And on the way home on the plane, she was like, God, we're so lucky to live in America. And then she started thinking, actually, how much further ahead are we in terms of, you know, she looked at the percentages of, you know, CEOs that were women, and it was dismal. So then she's like bringing it right back, and it's that systemic piece. And she was like, you know, how does it work within the home? So their daughter wanted to go to a school that was quite far away. And all of a sudden, you know, it was kind of going on her that she would do that drive. And she just stood up and she said, hey, you know, Bill, okay, let's do this, but I'd like you to do 2 days a week. So he agreed, and he did the 2 days a week. And then 1 month later, one of the moms said, hey, Melinda, do you see what's happened here? And she was like, oh yeah. And the carpool had changed from being all women to half men. And she said, do you know what happened? We went home and said, Bill Gates can do it.
Well, he's quite the draw in the car park at the school, I'd say. So Jenny, I spoke a little bit about early sort of engendering, and I know you're very passionate about that, about the role of parents and teachers in kind of broadening the horizons of young girls particularly. You might talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as you said, parents are the first role models for children, and the parents need to change how they look at life and how females and males should be equal. So I'd like to see, grassroots levels being the change of perception in that area. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, I want them to grow up that it's not women in sport, it's just sport. And that's why it's so important that parents think of their females and their males as equal and giving them the same opportunities. So for example, I remember hearing a mother saying, I don't mind if my girl stops sport, but I don't want my boy stopping sport. And just hearing that, if their child hears that, they suddenly feel like, if you're a girl, you're like, oh, well, it's okay if I stop sport. And my parents, they don't seem to think it's that important, but like my brother, he has to stay at it. So I don't know, is it more important for boys to do sport than girls to do sport?
And it's so funny that you say that, Jenny, because, I think we don't put enough credence on the fact that words matter. The words we say, to our children matter in their nuances,
They matter so much. You have to think kids are like sponges. So anything they hear, they just absorb. And I'm very proud of Jackie Hurley has brought out a book called Girls Play Too. And I'm lucky enough to be one of the 25 females featured in this book. So it's fairy tales. It's real life fairy tales of female athletes, of things that happened to them when they were younger and what they overcame to get to where they are. And these stories are being read to young girls throughout Ireland, and they're seeing, oh, well, if she can do it, I can do it. Just with, resilience, persistence, and by seeing someone else achieve something, it makes it real, it makes it normal, it makes it feel like, oh, well, like it's possible. So being able to show your children, boys and girls, and girls should be role models for boys as well, and that's really important.
Absolutely.
Like you were saying to me, you've adapted to the situation of training with men, and I have adapted, and I hope that what I've achieved is for them, I hope I'm a role model, because I've become the only athlete, female or male, to win Senior Canoe Sprint World Cup, World Championship and European Championship medals. And I hope then the boys and men can see, oh, well, if she can do it, I can do it. If she can win international major medals, then why can't I do it? She's Irish. She's training in Ireland, maybe goes away in training camp sometimes, but I see how much work and hard work she puts in and how resilient and persistent she is. And if Jenny can do it, why can't I not?
Well, Jenny, you're an absolute inspiration, and we're rooting for you as a nation, no doubt about that. Aoife, so you had a very particular situation where One for All was sold to Blackhawk during your maternity leave. So you come back into the workforce in a new culture, a new landscape, a new organisation. That must have been a huge challenge. I'd love to know sort of what the company provided as a sort of an infrastructure of support to you.
Yeah, it was a huge, as I was saying, it was challenging enough, and then you came back to a whole integration project, and so we were suddenly, as you said, like I was part of One for All since it was a startup, so that kind of family feeling, which still was retained while it grew to be an SME, and then you were part of this global, payments company, which is in 26 countries. Suddenly you're dealing with people, all over the world. But I suppose a big pro is that the CEO and president is a female, Talbot Roach, who is amazing and is a big champion of females in the workplace, but also in the kind of payments, fintech industry. Something initiative she's part of this year, which is amazing, which is providing mentorship for women in the payments industry. So you're paired up on a 6-month basis with someone. And I think what the advantage that I felt this has brought to me is definitely networking. And I think networking there's so much merit in it. And it can maybe typically was something that men were better at. But networking can take many different forms. And particularly now, thanks to COVID, it doesn't have to be events that you have to physically go to. They can be virtual, they can, the networks that I be part of now are, all over the world. But it's just that if you are, in terms of nurturing yourself and that leadership piece, it's so important, networking.
That you feel plugged in almost to a structure. Yeah.
And also that you just hear, other points of views that you wouldn't either. And it's that thing of not, you can, when life is busy, you can just be, maybe very into your own organization or your own industry. And it's just hearing those other points of view.
And Tracey, you've got a really interesting perspective on it from a business and finance awards point of view. So, you're looking at organizations through a particular lens. How did you see the impact of, I suppose, that gender lens in the participants in the awards?
I'm now in my second year in business and finance. And I think when I first joined the company and as part of the first year judging process, we could see there was a real deficit of women in senior management, and also women on boards. And, that year was the first year we introduced our very first diversity, equality and inclusion category. But really what we wanted to do was we wanted to make some kind of changes so that we were putting equality kind of at the core of the agenda, but in a really constructive way. So what we, working with Frances Rowan, the chairperson of our judging panel, we introduced new weighted criteria so that as part of the Company of the Year category, we requested information on headcount numbers and an overview of the executive profile of the companies. So this ensured, even through the judging process, that the conversation about balance within the businesses was built into the process. It wasn't something we just had to address while we were there. And also, I think for companies who were completing the application forms, they had to address their position in black and white. They had to actually write out exactly what was going on within their own companies. So I think really what happened was that our judges recognized the real importance of a diverse leadership team, and then kind of the resultant positive impacts that it has had on business performance, and that that changed the businesses that rose to the top within the process. So it really was, over the 2-year process, it's really changed. And it's been really exciting.
I love that, because it's such a baked in shift, that it's almost forcing the hands of the companies to realise this is a major issue and we need to address it. And Allison, there is no doubt that there is a responsibility on organisations to reframe how they engage to promote women in the workplace right up to senior executive level. What have you seen in terms of initiatives that can drive that forward?
I think it's, we've seen companies have tried genuinely to help people throughout the pandemic, because they know that their mental health naturally is really fragile. Is a strong word, but I'm going to actually use it, because people have never experienced something that hits every aspect of their life, and everybody has been affected differently. But, I think the burden of recognizing, boundaries, and perhaps that's what I've seen, is that they're encouraging, that companies have given people days off. And I know it doesn't sound much, but that kind of nearly like a mental health day, I would love to see that, being built in a little bit more, that rather than just being out because you're sick, actually having the courage to say, and rather being stigmatized, that you're like, actually, I need a day off. I'm not feeling that I'm not feeling clear. When you're actually doing something, you were saying when you did your first presentation, when you came back, Aoife, or Tracey, when you came back and you were teaching, you didn't feel it was your best self. And what you actually need in that moment is a reset button. Because what I'm feeling is, rather than kind of throwing up the balls in the air at the moment of life with all the different demands that people are having, it's just being able to step back and say, hey, I'm actually, we have the same level and equality for when you're physically sick as the day where you actually recognize, actually, I'm exhausted, I need a day where I refill. I think they're the type of initiatives.
Absolutely. Because I think this is really fundamentally a sustainability issue. It's the sustainability of your workforce. And I suppose the bigger issue then is what are the big chunks that we can move forward? Jenny, if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about the way women in sport was structured, what would you do?
Yeah, that's an important question. And I'd just like to maybe touch on the Sport Ireland have brought in a maternity policy to help female athletes to get back competing after having babies. So before it was thought of, oh, you know, you have a baby, that's it, your sporting career is over. But now we can see more and more throughout the world that women are having babies and they're coming back and they're stronger than they've ever been. So I'd like to say well done to Sport Ireland for bringing in this maternity policy to support women to be able to have babies and come back and compete. And that's a big step forward because, you know, every female in society, I think, gets the question at a certain age. It's like, oh, you know, when are you going to have babies? Are you going to stop? Are you going to stop working? Or like, how are you going to continue working? And for me, it's like, I'm getting a question, oh, kind of, you know, when are you going to stop competing? You know, are you going to have a baby and that? And for me now, I answer going, oh, well, it's great because Sport Ireland have brought in a maternity policy. And, you know, if I feel fit enough and strong enough and I have a good support network, then I can have a baby and come back competing and, you know, show my child that it's possible to do anything that you want to. And that's a big part, I think, that I'd like to change, that for children to grow up knowing that if there's something you really want and you put your mind to it and you're resilient and you're persistent and you have that support network, then you can achieve anything.
Amazing. And I mean, I'm still kind of reeling from the fact that people still ask the question, when are you going to have a baby? That it's just not okay. It's a private matter. So, you know, I think there are certain things that are sacrosanct. You don't know people's circumstances. Aoife, you know, if you could change one thing about how we engage, how we do work, quickly, what would it be?
I think the big one is equal pay for equal roles. You know, we know we're still not there. I don't know why we're still not there. But I think we all have a role to play in it. But I think there would be just a huge shift if we had that assurance.
Yeah, and it is already enshrined in law since the 1970s, so it seems insane. But I mean, I think that the equal opportunity piece is a big piece of that as well. Tracey, what about you?
I think, look, I'd love to see more women in leadership roles. And I think the big thing for me is that removing the barrier that there is between stepping into a leadership role and raising a family, that, you know, that you can do both. But there's a perception sometimes, I think, with women that it's not worth the stress, that, you know, you don't want to, is work more important than having a family? And can you, you know, why is that? You know, and why do we feel that? So if we could remove that barrier and that, you know, employers had the flexibility to accommodate parenting responsibilities, so that jobs aren't, you know, too demanding, so that it's not worth taking that step up, and that you really feel that you can take the step up and also be a parent and do them all well.
And I think you're right. Yeah, you said normalising, and it's the normalising is nearly more important than the accommodating, because the accommodating seems like a token, you know. Allison, finally, just a little wrap up. You know, what are you seeing, the big picture stuff, in terms of how organisations can really push this forward?
What I'm seeing is that I recognise that they're actually listening. And they're listening because if their employees aren't actually physically, mentally, or emotionally able to actually work, then it's a major problem. So, you know, recognizing that psychological flexibility is the way forward. That's the workplace of the future. Working from home, whatever way it's going to go, you know, we're never going to go back fully. We really aren't. There's lots of advantages that people can actually see. But I see that organizations need to start questioning kind of toxic presenteeism and toxic productivity, and that the mandate that's been sent out, that they're valuing work-life balance, it has to actually happen. So therefore the boss needs to stop actually sending that email, just have a quick look at this after a certain time, and maybe that permission piece, permission to log off. I think we just need to shift the work-life balance and actually put life first. And maybe that's the biggest lesson we've actually taken from this year, that we are allowed, it's not a dirty kind of secret that you actually like. Perhaps you want to have a family, you want to have a relationship, you want to have some free time. These are not dirty, bad things, and that we value that systemically rather than this kind of curse of busyness that I see that really is running people into the ground.
Absolutely. And I think man, woman, child, we work to live, and that's what the aim is here, that we can normalise this move forward. Jenny, Aoife, Tracey, Allison, thank you so much for taking the time today to be so honest and so open about your own challenges, and here's to the solutions.
Hello, my name is Maureen Nibalcon. I'm the creator of Mo Style, Mo Talks, and now Misha Collars. 5 years ago, I underwent brain surgery for a condition called moya moya. During the surgery, I had a stroke. So when I woke up, I was unable to speak, read or write. 2.5 years later, I applied to Dress for Success as a stylist and they took me on. I absolutely love working with Dress, and I think that gave me the confidence to start my own businesses. So I now run Mo Style, Mo Talks, and during lockdown, I started Misha Collars, where we make handmade fashion collars. So thank you, Dress for Success.
Hi, Vanessa O'Mahony here, Sales and Business Development Director at Slack. Nuala and the full team from Dress for Success did a super job in matching us mentors with the right mentees. This was based on our experience and skills, matched with the individual goals of their clients to the fore. They offered us loads of guidance and a supportive structure to operate within, while of course encouraging us to find meaningful relationships that were unique and fruitful to those mentees. We all know how crazy 2020 was, but this programme was one of the gifts of 2020 for me and is a powerful vehicle to really drive change.
I'm delighted to be joined today by CEO of Unpust, David McRedmond. David, Unpust have positioned themselves, rightfully so, as an exemplar in terms of gender equality in Ireland. You might just tell our audience what you have done to achieve that.
Well, hi, Sonia. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Yeah, I think, look, what's happened in Unpust is, as really part of a kind of transformation of the organisation, is, you know, we've rebuilt particularly the top of the organisation, and absolutely at the forefront of that has been diversity, and in particular gender equality. So when I came into Unpust 4 years ago, the management team, much to my surprise, was 12 men, all of whom were very good and qualified and doing good work. But was not a reflection at all of our customers, not a reflection of our society. And also, there was a real sense of a very limited and narrow debate. So immediately, I had to find somebody in the organization who could change it. And somebody said they'd a very good person who was due to leave, and she became my chief of staff, Aoife Byrne. And Aoife and I set about really reforming that management team and designing for the organization in the future. So we ended up 3 years later with a management team. It took us, well, actually probably about 2.5 years to get to a team that actually was 50-50 male, female, and a smaller team. And today it's 4 men and 4 women. And that's a good position to be in.
And David, can I ask you, because I'm really interested in the fact that you saw that as a deficit from the very beginning, which 4 or 5 years ago is actually quite unusual, and not through any sense of malice, but there has been traditionally a sense of kind of benign blindness as to the need for gender equality. Where did that come from with you?
You know, I'd come from media, and I'd actually seen some of the issues there, where actually the team was also imbalanced, very much a male team. But it became clear to me there, you know, when I was in TV3, that actually for us to make better decisions, you need more viewpoints around the table. And the starting point to more viewpoints is to have men and women around the table, never mind further diversity, whether that be ethnicity, whether it be social class or whatever. And it's a pretty simple idea, which is you need broader views to be able to make the right decisions. And the decisions you make as a management team, things like budgets and legal issues and some of the big important issues, they're easy enough to manage. And they're the kind of, they're almost what I would call the kind of alpha decisions, which you get to straight away. The real problem are the things that are judgmental. You know, what is our strategy going to be? What's the future going to look like? What's our brand going to feel like? What's the culture of the organization going to be? Where there's no right or wrong answer, but you need something that comes from a much greater and wider base. So I think that's where it came from.
And I think, you know, any company that serves the public in its widest sense, you know, depending on which report you read, women are responsible for, you know, in excess of 85% of all consumer decisions. So it makes sense to be looking at a sort of a representative decision-making team.
Well, it's look, I mean, look at the results for An Post. You know, we've moved from being a business that was essentially a letters business into a business that today is at the core of e-commerce. E-commerce being consumers buying everything in their homes. Now, the lockdown and the pandemic have played a part in that, but they've just accelerated a trend that was there. But how could we possibly understand that without having wider views around the table? And that's not about shopping and e-commerce, that's one part of it, but it's actually about the nature of how people lead their lives. So when we did research into the An Post brand, we actually discovered that while typically our customers would be older, skewing in the population, we discovered that actually the customer group that was most willing to give An Post a chance was female, typically in their 30s, middle income. That was the core, that was the kind of bullseye in marketing terms. We call her Kira, and she lives in Naas, and she's 35. And you know, once you look at your market and you go, wow, that's the really interesting piece. I know from media that typically males are more rigid in their thinking. They tend to have decided these are the brands I'm going to follow and I'm going to stick with them. And likewise, older demographics have typically made up their mind. We know that when it comes to voting, that in voting patterns, demographics over 60, 65, while they have a very high propensity to vote, they have a very low propensity to change how they vote. However, women have a much higher propensity to change, but just look around more. They tend to be more analytical in terms of saying, right, what are the choices which are open to me? And so it becomes quite an interesting challenge as you face into a world. But if you're going to change an organization, you need to change the things in an organization to know how to do that.
And this, you know, everything that you're saying makes perfect sense, but it can't have been easy. And I think one of the really helpful things for companies who are even thinking about starting this journey, because there's so much work to be done, I'd love to know what sort of organizational challenges you faced in driving this forward, because that's a big move to 50% representation at the top table.
Yeah, look, I think change is never easy, and particularly change in people. Two things: if you want an easy life, you know, live on your own and lock yourself up. But change in people is difficult, but it's not that difficult, because here's the interesting thing. I think, and maybe I've just got a benign view, but certainly my male colleagues who I work with, as well as my female colleagues, absolutely recognize once it's put in front of them, and I think that's the key leadership piece, is to put it in front of people, make sure that people have to face up to it. I think that people can see that need for change, and I certainly see it from colleagues, male and female, who say they see the benefits. Garrett Bridgman, who runs our mails and parcels business, he has said, and he's worked in that team for a long time, he said the change was dramatic. He said it's dramatic in terms of the conversation around the table. So I actually have found that the change, once you put it in front of people, and here's another piece which is actually probably to me is the one bit of advice I can give to people, there needs to be a kind of zero tolerance for calling people girls, for having conversations in the corridor, for the remotest suggestion that something unfair is going on here. All of those things, I think they have to be called out, and there has to be zero tolerance for it. Once you do that, I think people will come with you. And to be fair, again, to to colleagues, whether male or female, because we all get fixed in positions, we all have to change our mindset. We all pick up habits in our lives. I'm no less subject to unconscious bias than the next person. I have the same issues. I make the same mistakes. But being honest about it and calling it out and getting your colleagues to call it out can be very useful. And I can tell you, it's been called out on me in meetings where I've used terms that people think shouldn't be used.
Yeah, and this is an area that I'm particularly fascinated in, is this, I suppose, acceptance that you're going to have, many failures along the way, and that you need to be sort of humble enough to accept that and to create that culture where that, zero tolerance in one way, but in another way that you acknowledge that you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think with any change, you have to go into knowing that not everything's going to work, and you don't let that derail you. I do think that's why you need that almost zero tolerance and being very clear up front. This is what we are doing. We are going to get to being a gender balanced organization. One of the things we did is we published our gender pay report, and we published a couple of years before it's law because we wanted to get into the habit of it. And we're lucky because we've made some changes in the organization that it's now relatively narrow. It's down to 1.4%. It still should be zero. But I think, once you're clear this is the way we're going and then you measure it, then you'll have ups and downs along the way. It's a classic thing, I think, in any organization. Set the direction, we're heading north. And we might wobble along the way, but keep heading north. And the support is very clear. The support from staff now, as I say, male and female, the support is unequivocal, that people see that this is what we are doing. And I think, one of the old chestnuts is, well, people should be chosen on their merit. And by the way, I get that from really talented female staff as well, saying, people should be chosen on their merit. I'm going, they are, but if you have a rule that you have to have 50-50 shortlists, so for a role, then you know that whatever unconscious bias, you're cutting through that to make sure you have the best females and the best male, and then the best person gets chosen.
So you're forcing the statistics, if you like.
Well, you're forcing up to that point.
Yes.
But when you're actually choosing the person for the job, I guarantee you the best person, or in terms of our judgment, we can always make misjudgments, the best person is chosen. But we know that whatever barriers are hidden along the way, we've cut them out by forcing through the 50-50 at that selection point.
At the panel level.
At that level. And that really makes a big difference. And so not surprisingly, the next level down now, in what is quite a male organization, we've seen an awful lot of female talent come through, which is brilliant. I mean, look at this. We've doubled our pool of expertise overnight. People dream of going into territories and setting up businesses and saying, how do I find the best talent? We talk about Ireland being a great country for talent. Well, how about you actually look at 100% of the talent and not 50% of the talent? It's very simple, in conceptually, and then actually executing it is easier than maybe you think.
David, I could literally talk to you all day, but unbelievably, we're pretty much out of time. Just before I let you go, I'd love to hear from you what one piece of advice you would give to any organisation thinking about setting out on this journey towards gender equality.
I think it has to be led from the top. Don't, look, I have a brilliant HR director. HR is such an important function, but don't put it in HR any more than you should put all your technology into your technology function. It has to be led from the top. That would be the piece of advice with no cynicism.
Amazing. David, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it, and continued success.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Mortal from Rethink Ireland. We run a fund called the Manana Heron Fund, which is focused on providing supports to organisations like Dress for Success that support women to get access to the labour court, especially disadvantaged women. So, what are we learning from all of them about COVID-19? Well, we know that women are disproportionately losing their jobs because look, the tourism industry and the retail industry and the hospitality industry are closed. They're dominated by women. We also know that women find it harder to return to work when those jobs do come back because the schools are still closed and women are looking after parents and grandparents. So the burden of care is preventing women from accessing the jobs they may have lost. And we're worried that women just won't return to work at the end of this period because the barriers are too big. So what do we need? We need Dress for Success to keep shouting about the gender pay gap, and well done for what you've done so far. But we also need the Oireachtas COVID-19 committee to have more women on it and to hold a special session on the gender impact of COVID-19 so that women, whatever policies are made, we know what the impact on women is. So thank you and have a good day.
Hi everybody, it's really nice to join you around International Women's Day. My name is Margot Slattery and I'm the Global Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for an organisation called Sodexo. We make up a community of 420,000 people globally. Why do I believe in equality? I guess down to the very simple fact that the world is made up mostly of 50% women and 50% men. And I believe that workplace and the whole of our life should reflect that. And it should be an equal world for everybody. So what can organizations and individuals do? I think organizations can make sure that there's leadership from the top, that they're consistent, that they make sure there's an opportunity to have their voice heard and provide the right environment for everybody to feel equal. And for individuals to play their part in that and to make sure it happens. And my top tips are to have consistency, leadership from the top, and to continue to always have your voice and be heard. Thank you.
Just 5 key points that I would like you to take away as actionable points that you can take practical action of in your life. And the first thing is in terms of the personal challenges, from my perspective, what I would see for many is the mental load. And it's the idea of seeing the invisible work that many women do within the home and to make them more visible, and then to look at ways that actually can tangibly help with that. So an app called Our Home app is a wonderful app that can be used within a family to help share the responsibilities, because the mental load isn't just the physical labor of it. It's the thinking work that goes into remembering all of the tasks. So I think cognitively that's incredibly tiring for women as they remember and do the physical aspects. So something like Our Home app is a tangible way to overcome this. The second point, and what you'll find interesting in all these points, is how systemic they are. One leads into the other. So how would you challenge this, say, with your partner within the home? Again, what can happen is some people can feel like you're nagging and you're having the same conversation, but nothing actually changes. To have a conversation that actually challenges and changes, I would recommend that you complain rather than criticize. When you complain, it's solution focused, it's specific, and things can actually change. But when you criticize, it's personal and the person will become defensive, and it's very destructive to your relationship. So by complaining rather than criticizing, again, we can bring about the change we're looking for. The third aspect I would like to help with is, say you're a mother and you have children. One of the main results I have seen of the pandemic is exhaustion. The antidote to that exhaustion is rest. And as we look back to the mental load and we begin to make small but sustainable changes within our homes, we talk with our partners. The third aspect of that, if you have children, is to actually show them by example that you rest. And how do you actually rest? Again, it's a tangible small thing called the Dear Challenge. And the Dear Challenge is where you drop everything and rest. This could be a matter of literally having a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, but you're actually showing your children. So if they come over and they're interrupting you or they're trying to talk, you say, I'm taking 5 minutes to myself. This is something that is incredibly important, because a lot of times clients would have said to me that when they are overworking themselves, I would ask, did you ever see your mother sit down? And the poignant response has often been, I never saw my mother sitting down. So we are teaching not just ourselves and restoring the exhaustion that is actually there, but we're showing by example the importance of having boundaries and taking time to rest. Number 4, how do we do this within our wider network? I think the first question is, what part of your life can you unsubscribe to? It would be handy if we could pick certain boxes and unsubscribe to certain things that we don't want to be part of. Our boundaries are very important in terms of how we value our time and our energy. And as you can see, each point is linked into the other. And this is how we actually protect our energy so that we can actually be our best selves in all the different aspects of our lives. And the fifth point is, how do we challenge our organizations? For me, it's challenging the unconscious bias. And again, the unconscious bias is recognizing that we all have biases. We all have biases specifically with gender and even ourselves. And that can be quite unbelievable to actually perceive, but it is actually true. So by identifying the narrative that you carry about whether you think you're good enough to go for that next role, and as we challenge these unconscious bias, we're giving ourselves the opportunities to walk through doors that perhaps we have closed for ourselves. A really wonderful TED Talk to watch is by Kristen Pressner, and she says there's a wonderful test where you flip it to test it. So if you find that you think, I don't have any unconscious bias, I suggest you take 20 minutes to watch this and begin to see what was unseen before.
Thank you so much for being with us today. And of course, a huge thanks to our sponsors, One for All, Communicorp Media Group, TAP Creations, Irish Life and Business and Finance Media Group. If you'd like to donate to Dress for Success, head to dressforsuccessdublin.org and we'll see you soon.